I didn't just break into my daughter-in-law's forbidden closet. I discovered that she wasn't Sarah Vance at all. The quiet life she built with my son was nothing but stolen history, archived under a loose floorboard. The house felt less like a home and more like a high-end storage unit for perfect living. That's the thing about Westport, Connecticut. Everything is aspirational, pressed, and slightly sterile. I had come to stay for 2 weeks, a necessary evil, a truce between my own dusty, comfortable New England apartment and the blindingly white, modern mausoleum my son, Michael, and his wife, Sarah, inhabited. At 72, you learn the value of being overlooked. Invisibility is a gift, especially when dealing with the young. They see the silver hair, the slightly hesitant gait, the sensible shoes, and they immediately slot you into a safe, non-threatening category. The delister of the family drama. But being an archivist for 40 years at the Smithsonian taught me how to read the silence between the documents. I knew how to catalog the things people desperately wanted to forget. Sarah was the architect of this suffocating perfection. She was beautiful, in a polished, almost aggressive way, flawless manicure, clothes that never wrinkled, a laugh that sounded programmed for social gatherings. But she was too perfect. Her order wasn't about comfort, it was about control. Every cushion was chopped, every glass spotlessly polished, every conversation prescripted. It felt like walking into a museum display titled, The Ideal American Marriage. My intuition, honed by decades of sifting through historical lies, told me the display was rigged. The guest room, where I was staying, was no exception. It smelled faintly of linen spray and new paint. It was an homage to neutrality. But in the corner, disrupting the flow, was the only piece of furniture that carried any weight, an antique, heavy oak wardrobe. It felt out of place, a dark, heavy sentinel guarding the light. I was unpacking my small suitcase, a modest activity, when Sarah walked in, carrying a basket of freshly pressed towels. I reached out a hand, almost unconsciously, to steady myself on the thick brass handle of the wardrobe. The air temperature dropped instantly. Sarah stopped, the basket frozen mid-hip. Her usual practiced smile vanished, replaced by a mask of cold, hard stone. Her eyes, usually the color of a polite summer sky, were suddenly slate gray and sharp. "Don't," she said. The word wasn't a request or a motherly instruction, it was an order, cut short, delivered with the precision of a guillotine. I pulled my hand back slowly, feeling a faint, accusatory sting. "My apologies, dear. Just steadying myself." Sarah placed the basket down, her movements unnervingly controlled. "That closet," she began, her voice low and dangerously even, "is filled with some old storage for Michael's clients. Sensitive files. He uses this room when he works from home. It's private, Ellie. And please," she leaned in slightly, a whisper of threat wrapped in expensive perfume, "don't open it. Ever." The lie was too big. Corporate files are stored in fireproof safes, not in dusty antique closets in a secondary bedroom. And Michael had a dedicated, alarmed study downstairs. I smiled gently, the mask of the deferential mother-in-law firmly in place. "Of course, dear. I wouldn't dream of it." But the lie had already begun to archive itself in my mind. Michael's files? No. That closet was guarding her history. And the fear I saw flash across her face told me that if I opened that door, I wouldn't find dusty papers. I would find a ghost. I knew, right then, that before the 2 weeks were over, I would know what Sarah was hiding. My quiet retirement was officially over. The excavation had begun. The next few days were excruciatingly polite. Sarah watched me, subtly, through the reflections in the pristine kitchen cabinets, through the corner of her eye during the forced evening news viewing. Michael, my son, a corporate lawyer who had traded his soul for a 6-figure salary and a house with a 3-car garage, was perpetually stressed, oblivious, or perhaps willfully blind. He saw only the facade Sarah presented, the attentive wife, the immaculate hostess. He saw the projection, not the woman. I observed Sarah's routines, cataloging them like data points. Her daily run at 6 a.m., the hour she spent meticulously cleaning the silver, the way she answered the landline phone, always checking the caller ID first, always with a practiced lightness that masked underlying tension. She was waiting for something. The air in the house was thick with unsaid things. On Friday morning, the tension finally crested. Michael and Sarah were leaving for a mandatory corporate retreat in the Berkshires. They had packed matching designer luggage. "You have everything, Mom?" Michael asked, kissing me quickly on the forehead. His touch was brief, transactional. "Absolutely fine, dear. I have my books and the remote control. What more could an old woman ask for?" I offered a reassuring, slightly self-deprecating smile, the kind that guarantees dismissal. "Great. If you need anything, call us. But try not to," Michael added, clearly already focusing on the quarterly budget presentation he had to deliver. Sarah walked past me, pulling on dark leather driving gloves. She paused at the threshold, her gaze lingering on the closed guest room door. She looked nervous, almost fragile, which was perhaps the most frightening look she had worn all week. "Remember what I said about the guest room, Ellie," she murmured, her voice losing its forced lightness. "That room is sensitive. Please, stick to the kitchen and the living room." "I shall be very good, Sarah," I promised, my eyes wide and innocent. "I promise." I watched the black Mercedes sedan glide silently down the perfect, tree-lined street. The moment the tail lights disappeared around the corner, a profound, almost criminal sense of relief washed over me. The quiet was no longer suffocating, it was empowering. I had 48 hours of absolute freedom. 48 hours for historical correction. I went to my small travel kit. I wasn't just an archivist, I was the daughter of a man who loved tinkering and the wife of a man who served in the Navy during Vietnam. I always carried a small, versatile set of tools, not for repairs, but for investigation, a sturdy, thin hairpin, a jeweler's screwdriver, and a strong, thin-bladed utility knife disguised as a letter opener. I climbed the immaculate, carpeted stairs. The silence of the house felt enormous, pressing in on my ears. It was the silence before an earthquake. I stood before the wardrobe. It wasn't just a piece of furniture, it was the physical manifestation of Sarah's secret. I examined the latch. It wasn't the original, century-old keyhole. A new, cheap, metallic padlock had been fitted onto the inside, fixed to the door frame. It was an amateur job, hastily done, meant to deter casual curiosity, not deliberate intent. Amateur, I thought, a small, grim smile touching my lips. "Sarah, you should have invested in a proper safe." My hands, though showing the signs of age, were still steady. I worked methodically, using the hairpin to explore the tumblers, listening for the tiny, satisfying clicks. The air in the room grew heavy and dusty, though I knew Sarah vacuumed daily. The scent was coming from inside the wood. The scent of history and decay. After perhaps 10 minutes, a lifetime when you are performing an act of intentional deception, the lock gave way with a soft, almost apologetic snick. I held my breath. I pushed the heavy oak door open slowly. The closet interior was not what Sarah had described. There were no sensitive corporate files. It was mostly empty. A few old, stained drop cloths piled carelessly in one corner. The smell intensified, not the mustiness of paper, but the sharp, acrid scent of old vinyl and settled dust. I stood back, disappointed for a second, then quickly reassured. Sarah wouldn't hide documents in the closet, she would hide them behind it, or under it. I focused on the floor. The flooring in the guest room was the original white plank oak, beautifully restored. But as I crouched down, using the light from the hallway, I saw it. Near the back corner, where the wall met the floor, the baseboard trim was slightly displaced. And more importantly, the end of one floorboard was elevated, perhaps by a millimeter or two, just enough to catch the light differently. It was a slight wave in the polished wood ocean. Sarah had missed this detail. Her perfection was focused on surfaces, not structure. I pulled out the utility knife. I slid the thin blade into the microscopic gap at the seam. The wood, likely loosened decades ago, offered little resistance. I felt a small, triumphant surge of adrenaline, a feeling I hadn't known since I found the misplaced original draft of the Emancipation Proclamation in a box labeled Miscellaneous 1863 Correspondence. I levered the knife gently. The board rose a half-inch. It was here, in the heart of Sarah's immaculate illusion, that I heard it. A dry, faint, distinct SHSHSH sound. A rustle. Not paper, but something heavier, more substantial, shifting against plastic. I froze, breath catching in my throat. My mind, usually a quiet catalogue of facts, was screaming, what if it's alive? A snake? A rat? This was Connecticut, not the Amazon, but the primal fear was instantaneous. I waited 5 agonizing seconds. The silence returned, thicker than before. My hand, steadying itself on the wall, pushed the board up higher. It lifted out completely, revealing a black, square void beneath the polished wood. The subfloor had been hollowed out. Inside the cavity, resting on the dirt below, was a thick, heavy-duty plastic bag, sealed with industrial-strength tape, the source of the rustling. It wasn't full of cash, which was my first, simplest guess. It was too flat, too densely packed. It was filled with history. My fingers trembled as I reached into the cool, damp earth and pulled the bag out. It felt heavy, cold, and utterly illicit. I gently peeled back the tape, careful not to damage the contents. I laid the contents out on the pristine oak floor. My heart hammered against my ribs, a loud, erratic drum solo in the silent house. The first thing I saw confirmed my deepest suspicions: identity fraud. Not just 1 or 2 fake IDs, but a stack of them, professionally rendered. 5 separate driver's licenses, each laminated, each bearing Sarah's face, but with different hair colors, different states, different dates of birth. Vivian Marsh, license from Oregon. Age listed as 38. Hair dark brown. Lena Cruz, license from Florida. Age listed as 40. Hair blonde. Chloe Sterling, license from New York. Age listed as 42, Sarah's actual approximate age. Hair, shockingly, bright red. I ran a hand over my mouth. This wasn't a woman living a secret life, this was a woman living 5 secret lives, all stored away like emergency rations. Then came the stack of financial instruments, credit cards, debit cards, and prepaid cards from banks across the country, all matching the names on the IDs. The sheer volume was dizzying. This wasn't just someone hiding from an ex-husband, this was industrial-level deception. But the true shock, the pivot point of the whole story, was the last item, a simple, yellowed manila envelope, sealed with a piece of brittle, aged Scotch tape. I peeled the tape back. The contents were thin, dry, and brittle. Newspaper clippings. All dated 20 years prior. I read the headlines, my vision blurring slightly from the sudden, profound shift in reality. Wall Street Whiz disappears with $5 million. Ether Dynamics accountant fugitive in corporate fraud scandal. Amelia Thorne, police suspect international flight. Amelia Thorne. The articles detailed a massive scheme. $5 million vanished from a high-tech firm. The main suspect, Amelia Thorne, had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only an empty apartment and a suicide note that police later dismissed as fabricated. At the bottom of the clipping pile was a grainy photograph, printed 20 years ago, of the missing accountant. I compared the photo to Sarah's face on the New York driver's license, Chloe Sterling. They were similar. Strikingly so. Same bone structure, same set to the jaw. But the woman in the photo, Amelia Thorne, had softer eyes, and nervous qualities Sarah completely lacked. And then I saw the detail that truly made me tremble. The name on Sarah's current identity, the one she used with Michael, Sarah Thorne Vance. Thorne. Not just similar bone structure. It was her family name. But Sarah was too young to be the corporate fugitive Amelia Thorne from 20 years ago. Sarah would have been just 22 then. So either Sarah had aged perfectly to conceal a decade of running, or she wasn't the fugitive herself. She was someone else. A sister. A replacement. A professional doppelganger. I sat back on my heels, the cold air from the cavity seeping into my joints. My daughter-in-law, the queen of pristine linens and flawless etiquette, was either a massive corporate thief who had expertly managed to scrub 2 decades from her life, or she was the living archive of that crime. I had to put it all back. Now. I had the photographic evidence. The excavation was complete. The preservation of the truth was the only thing left. I started taking pictures, hundreds of them, of every single card, every ID, every line of text in the brittle newspaper clippings. My archivist's instinct was screaming, documentation is everything. I had found the ghost in Michael's perfect house. And that ghost had $5 million and 2 decades of dangerous history riding on her silence. Once the cash was securely retaped and returned to the cold, dark cavity, the floorboard levered back into place, and the wardrobe door locked shut, I stood up slowly, dusting the faint residue of earth from my sensible trousers. The physical evidence was gone, but the mental archive was overflowing. My hands were shaking not from fear of being caught, but from the magnitude of the lie. This wasn't a domestic squabble or a mild infidelity. This was a crime with deep roots, potentially involving people far more dangerous than the police. Michael, my steady, predictable son, had married a woman who was a walking, breathing alias. How much did he know? Did Sarah, or whatever her real name was, marry him for love, or for his clean, financially powerful profile? A high-flying corporate attorney in a secure Connecticut suburb, the perfect camouflage. I sat on the edge of the guest bed, attempting to sort the historical records in my head. Hypothesis 1, Sarah is Amelia Thorne. Highly unlikely. Amelia Thorne was 40 in 2004. Sarah is 42 now. The math doesn't align with the photograph of the missing woman, who looked significantly older and more hardened than Sarah did in her student photos. Hypothesis 2, Sarah is Amelia's sister or relative. Plausible. The shared surname Thorne suggested a direct link. If Amelia stole the money and then disappeared, who would the criminals go after? The next of kin, forcing them into a life of subterfuge to keep the pressure off the fugitive. I reviewed the documents I had captured on my phone. Chloe Sterling, Lena Cruz, Vivian Marsh. Why so many identities? Why keep them all in one place? If you're running, you keep 1, maybe 2, in active rotation. Storing 5 aliases meant Sarah was either preparing for multiple, sequential escapes, or she was managing identities for someone else. The newspaper clippings mentioned the missing $5 million was speculated to be dirty money related to an organization known for aggressive recovery methods. 20 years ago, that usually meant the nascent Russian mob or an East Coast syndicate looking to launder funds through tech startups. Those groups do not forget $5 million. They hold grudges like family heirlooms. Sarah wasn't just hiding history, she was living on borrowed time, perhaps as a sacrificial pawn. My responsibility was clear, Michael. He was walking around in a minefield he didn't even know existed. But if I went to him, Sarah would vanish immediately, and the consequences of exposing the aliases could put him in direct danger. If I went to the police, the same result, but with added bureaucracy and media exposure. I needed information. Not police reports, but the context, the flavor, the archival notes the public never sees. I needed the case file on Amelia Thorne. And I knew exactly how to find it. I pulled out my old, heavy-duty laptop. It was slow, cumbersome, and rarely connected to the house's Wi-Fi. I used a hardwired VPN and logged into a series of databases I still had access to from my Smithsonian days, the obscure archives, the digital mausoleums of public records and police reports that fell just outside the easy reach of Google. The name, Detective Robert Sterling. The lead investigator on the ether dynamics case, according to the small, barely legible print at the bottom of the old newspaper clipping. I typed the name into a specialized search engine. The results pinged instantly. Robert Sterling, retired NYPD homicide and fraud. Currently living in rural Connecticut, specializing in private consultation for insurance claims. He was still in the archive business. Just like me. I just needed to lure him out of retirement, using a language only a fellow historian of secrets would understand. I sent him an email from a secure, disposable account, creating a narrative that was partially true and totally seductive to a retired investigator, seeking consultation on a sensitive historical document involving a large, unresolved corporate fraud case from the early 2000s. The documents may contain key details the original investigators missed. I closed the laptop quickly. The house remained silent, but the clock was ticking. It was already Saturday afternoon. Sarah and Michael would be back Sunday evening. I had less than 30 hours to confirm the magnitude of the threat and formulate a strategy. My old archivist hands, which had spent decades handling fragile parchment, were now handling the fragility of my son's life. Saturday morning brought an uncharacteristic, dreary rain to Westport. The perfect setting for clandestine activity. The light was flat and gray, casting the immaculate white surfaces of the house in shades of anxiety. I had arranged the meeting with Detective Sterling for 1 p.m. at a place halfway between Westport and his home in rural Litchfield County, a diner called the Chrome Grill, notorious for strong coffee and an atmosphere of perpetual forgetfulness, a good place for secrets. I told Michael on the phone, he called precisely at 9 a.m., his voice strained, that I was running out to a rare book sale in New Haven. He barely listened, preoccupied with Sarah's sudden, unexplained migraine. "She's just been under a lot of pressure, Mom," he mumbled. "She gets tense when she's away from the house." Tense, because she left her escape hatch unlocked, I thought grimly. I drove my borrowed, sensible sedan, a loaner from Michael that blended perfectly with the other anonymous upscale cars, out of the suburb. The transition was quick, from controlled wealth to the frayed edges of regional highways, then finally into the quiet, wooded back roads of Connecticut. The Chrome Grill was exactly as I had hoped, peeling vinyl booths, the smell of burnt bacon grease clinging to the air, and a clientele that looked permanently resigned to disappointment. Robert Sterling was already waiting in a back booth, nursing a black coffee. He was in his mid-60s, thick-set, wearing a tweed jacket that looked 10 years too old, and a weary cynicism that settled around him like smoke. He hadn't just retired, he looked like he had been archived himself. I slid into the booth across from him. "Detective Sterling?" "I'm Eleanor Vance." He didn't offer a handshake, just squinted at me over the rim of his cup. "You look like a retired history professor, Eleanor. You sound like trouble." "I was an archivist." "The two are often synonymous," I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. He raised an eyebrow, a flicker of something assessing in his eyes. "You said sensitive documents. What historical society are you representing?" "None. I'm representing my peace of mind. And maybe my son's life." I didn't offer him coffee. I just pulled out my phone and laid the captured images of the 5 driver's licenses and the old newspaper clippings on the table, careful to keep my focus steady despite the clatter of plates nearby. Sterling stared at the collage of aliases, then at the grainy photo of Amelia Thorne. He picked up the phone, holding it close to his face. His breathing hitched slightly. "Chloe Sterling. Vivian Marsh. Thorne." He muttered, then looked up at me, his cynicism replaced by a cold, calculating professional focus. "Where the hell did you get these, Eleanor?" "They belong to my daughter-in-law, Sarah Vance. Her maiden name is Thorne. She is currently living under the Sarah Vance identity. But she is, or was, one of those women in the pictures. Or perhaps, the keeper of those names." Sterling leaned back, wiping his mouth with a paper napkin. "Amelia Thorne. Jesus. 20 years. We thought she was either dead or holed up on some island selling artisanal soaps. What did you miss, detective? Those clippings suggest organized crime involvement, not just white-collar theft. He sighed, the sound heavy with old regret. We missed the why. The official story was that Amelia Thorne, the brilliant accountant, went rogue, cleaned out the client funds, and disappeared. Case closed by the feds. But I was NYPD fraud. I didn't believe it. He leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. That $5 million wasn't profit. It was a transfer of black money, structured to look like investments. The firm, Ether Dynamics, was a shell. When Amelia pulled the pin, she didn't just steal from a corporation, she stole from people who measure debt in body parts, not dollars. The Russian mob, I supplied quietly. Or the remnants of it. They have long memories and deeper pockets than the FBI. They were looking for the money, yes. But more importantly, they were looking for Amelia. Sterling pointed to the picture of Chloe Sterling, Sarah's red-haired alias. Why keep all these identities? This is excessive paranoia. Or, she's not the primary target. She's the insurance policy. The keeper of the flame, I mused. The substitute identity used to draw fire. Sterling nodded slowly, the cynicism returning, but mixed with dread. If this Sarah is connected to Amelia, the people who lost that money know it. And they know Amelia's family. They are waiting for the money to surface. And if your Sarah is hoarding these IDs, it means she's waiting for the signal to run. Or, worse, the signal that she's no longer useful. When would that signal come? When the money is finally accessible. Or when they decide she knows too much and the risk of exposure outweighs her use as a decoy. He paused, looking at me with grave seriousness. If Sarah is Amelia's sister, she's probably been running since 2004, forced to live under surveillance by the very people hunting Amelia. They control the aliases. They control the money trail. They put her in places they can watch, like marrying a clean-cut corporate lawyer in a safe suburb. My blood ran cold. Michael wasn't camouflage, he was a convenient anchor. He was part of the trap. I need to know if the money trail is active, I told Sterling. It is, he confirmed, taking a slow sip of his coffee. I still have contacts. The funds are structured through 3 offshore accounts. 2 have been dormant. The third, a Panamanian account under the name A. Thorne, is scheduled to become accessible, meaning transferable and traceable, in 3 days. Tuesday morning. Tuesday. I had found the package on Friday. They were due back Sunday night. Sarah was planning to be gone by Tuesday. And if she wasn't running, she was being moved. I thanked Sterling, leaving him only with the pictures of the IDs, not telling him precisely where I found them. I had to protect Michael's home base. Be careful, Eleanor, Sterling warned as I stood up. You're an archivist, but these people are rewriting history with violence. If Sarah is preparing to run, she's putting a target on that house. Underscore 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 underscore. Chapter 6. Ticking down. The drive back to Westport felt interminable. The rain had intensified, washing the windshield and sheets, mirroring the chaos unfolding in my mind. I had 28 hours until Michael and Sarah returned, and 72 hours until the money became active on Tuesday. The stakes had been raised exponentially. This wasn't just about a woman lying to her husband, it was about protecting my son from people who operate outside the law, using him as collateral. When I arrived back at the house, the silence was no longer welcoming. It was predatory. I bypassed the living room, heading straight to the guest suite. I had missed something in the rush. If Sarah was an expert in layered deception, she wouldn't hide everything in the same place. I went back to the closet, locked the door for privacy, and opened the cavity again. The plastic bag felt different now, less historical artifact, more ticking time bomb. I ran my hands along the edges of the cavity. It was deeper than I initially thought. I dug my fingers into the cold, dry earth beneath where the bag rested. And there it was. It was small, hidden by the bag. A thin, leather-bound notebook, about the size of an index card. It didn't look like an accounting ledger or a diary. It was almost empty, save for 3 pages filled with dense, neat handwriting. Not in English, but in numbers, symbols, and seemingly random capital letters. A cipher. A code. My specialty was historical documents, not cryptography, but I recognized the structure, a substitution cipher, likely tied to a specific text or key. I brought the notebook downstairs, wrapping it in a dish towel, and took it to the study. I had to assume the house was bugged, but the study was Michael's sanctum, heavily protected by legal firewalls and his own obsessive privacy. The first step was to identify the key. What document would a modern runner and an accountant use as a key text? A book? A Bible verse? Too common, too easy to crack. I went back through the photos of the IDs. Vivian Marsh. Lena Cruz. Chloe Sterling. The names were anchors. Was the key based on their letters? No. Too obvious. I looked at the dates on the IDs. The addresses. One of the addresses was a P.O. box in rural Ohio, listed under Lena Cruz. I quickly Googled the coordinates. The location was near a major shipping hub. Then it struck me. The language of business. I started running common financial and legal texts through a substitution solver, focusing on words like transfer, asset, deposit, acquisition. It took me 4 agonizing hours, fueled by stale coffee and a desperate fear that felt cold and metallic in my stomach. The complexity wasn't in the symbols, but in the shifts. It was a variation on the Vigenère cipher, likely using a short, repeating key. Finally, I found it. The key was a simple corporate phrase, Ether Dynamics. The notebook wasn't a running schedule, it was a routing sheet. I transcribed the first line, my hand shaking with the effort. Tuesday 6 o'clock, Zurich transfer initiate. Tuesday 10 o'clock, rendezvous Greenpoint Park N41.22.887W73.11.002. Tuesday 11 o'clock, delivery. The code revealed the plan. On Tuesday morning, a transfer was to be initiated from the Panamanian account through Zurich. The money was moving. But more importantly, the second part was local. Greenpoint Park. A specific set of GPS coordinates, located just a short drive from Westport. Rendezvous. Delivery. Sarah wasn't just planning to run, she was planning a transaction. She was meeting someone to hand over something, perhaps the codes for the full $5 million, in exchange for her freedom, or perhaps simply a new, final, single identity. I looked at the coordinates. They pointed to an isolated, wooded corner of the large municipal park. A place where a black SUV could meet a nervous woman without observation. Suddenly, the phone rang, startling me so badly I dropped the pen. It was Michael. His voice was sharper than before. Mom. We're coming back. My breath caught. What? Is Sarah all right? No, actually, she's not. She insisted we leave early. Said she had a terrible premonition. Something about the house. His voice was laced with annoyance. We're about an hour out, Mom. I'll see you soon. He hung up before I could ask another question. Sarah didn't have a premonition. She had been tipped off. Someone had watched me leave the diner. Or someone had monitored my digital activity. Or perhaps, the moment I sent that test email, I know about Amelia, the tripwires were activated. I looked down at the coded notebook. The plan was for Tuesday. But if they were back now, the timeline had been accelerated. I had less than an hour. I needed to put everything back, perfectly. The slightest disturbance, a smudged fingerprint, a slightly raised floorboard, and Sarah would know I had been hunting through her life. My heart rate stabilized, thanks to the sheer necessity of rapid, precise action. Panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. I was an archivist, I could restore order, even if the underlying history was poisonous. I raced back to the guest room. I forced myself to slow down my breathing, focusing only on the manual labor. The codebook went back into the cavity. The plastic bag, the IDs, the clippings, all sealed and returned. I pressed the floorboard down, hearing the familiar, reassuring thunk of solid wood on the joist. I locked the wardrobe. I checked the bedspread, the pillows. Perfect. Then, I saw it. It wasn't obvious. To the untrained eye, it was nothing. But Sarah was not untrained, she was obsessively meticulous. On the white painted baseboard, right where the floorboard met the wall, there was a thin scratch. It wasn't caused by the letter opener, but by the brass edge of the floorboard as I hurriedly dropped it back into place. It was a tiny line of disrupted paint, no longer than 1/8 of an inch, but it spoke volumes. It screamed, intrusion. I dabbed at it with my finger. The paint was too hard, too permanent. I couldn't fix it. I retreated, moving quickly to the kitchen to boil water for tea. I had to look like the image of quiet, domestic stability. 45 minutes later, the sound of the luxury sedan pulling into the driveway shattered the quiet. Michael rushed in first, looking exhausted, shedding his coat onto the pristine leather sofa, a gesture Sarah would normally forbid. "Mom, thank God you're here," he said, clearly relieved to find the house standing. "Sarah's migraine is brutal. She's going straight to bed." Sarah walked in behind him. She was pale, her composure visibly fractured for the first time. But her eyes were roaming. Cataloging. She didn't look tired, she looked wired, like a finely tuned instrument about to snap. "Hello, Ellie," she said, her voice flat. She didn't come near me. She went straight to the stairs, passing the guest room door without a glance. A deliberate act of neglect, perhaps, or a test. Michael went into his study. I stayed in the kitchen, meticulously cleaning a spot that was already clean. I knew Sarah wasn't in bed. I listened to the house. I heard her footsteps, not heavy, but decisive, moving toward the guest room. The brief pause. The soft click of the doorknob. I held my breath. The silence that followed stretched out, thin and painful. She was checking. She was at the wardrobe. She was looking at the lock, the floor, the baseboard. I waited for the sound of screaming, or the frantic sound of the heavy luggage being pulled out. Nothing. A few minutes later, Sarah reappeared, now wearing a silk robe, her hair tied back. She descended the stairs with agonizing slowness. She came into the kitchen. She didn't acknowledge the tea I had brewed. She went straight to the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of pristine, imported sparkling water. "Are you feeling better, dear?" I asked, my voice calm, almost dull. "Much better," she replied, her eyes finally locking onto mine. There was no warmth, only clinical assessment. "A little rest and a lot of water usually cures it." She paused, taking a slow sip. "You know, Ellie," she said, her voice dropping to that dangerous, low register from Friday. "I was just checking the guest room. I noticed a small scratch on the baseboard. Right near the closet. It must have happened when I moved those towels." My heart hammered. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't packed. She was testing the waters. "Oh, dear," I said, placing the teapot down, pretending to be distracted. "I didn't notice. I hope it's not too deep." It's nothing, really, Sarah said, a slow, predatory smile forming. But it made me realize how fragile things are. How easy it is for an illusion of perfect order to be disrupted. Sometimes, we think we are just passing through someone's life, just observing, but in reality, we end up leaving deep, structural scars. Her eyes were telling me, I know you were in the vault. And now we deal with the consequences. Sarah made no further move that night. The evening was defined by a strained, forced normalcy. Michael, oblivious to the silent battle being waged inches away, complained about the company retreat and fell asleep watching cable news. I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, replaying the sequence of the scratch. Sarah had deliberately initiated an attack, not of violence, but of psychological warfare. She was confirming my intrusion while establishing the danger of my continued involvement. Monday morning arrived, sunny and deceptively peaceful. Michael left for his firm early, muttering about an emergency brief. Sarah watched him go, then came straight to the kitchen where I was making toast. Ellie, I thought we should talk, she said, her tone suddenly intimate, bordering on manipulative. Over tea. In the living room. The living room, the center of the perfect display, was the stage. We sat facing each other over the low coffee table. The air was charged. She was waiting for me to confess. I was waiting for her to reveal the full architecture of her lie. You are a very thorough woman, Ellie, Sarah began, avoiding any mention of the closet, but staring directly at my hands. An archivist's mind. You find gaps in the records. That must be very satisfying. Sometimes the gaps are better left unfilled, I countered, keeping my voice soft and even. Some history is best left buried. Sarah's perfect smile tightened. I agree entirely. Which brings us to the history you uncovered. You know enough to destroy everything. Michael's career. My life. Maybe yours too. I only care about Michael, I stated clearly. He thinks he has a life here. I want to know what I need to do to protect him from the past you brought into this house. Sarah put her teacup down with a light clink. The sound resonated loudly. I didn't bring the past, Ellie. The past was brought to me. 20 years ago, Amelia Thorne, my sister, stole $5 million. But she didn't steal it from an accounting firm. She stole it from men who promised to kill everyone she loved if she didn't cooperate. She was trying to buy our freedom. My second hypothesis was correct. Sarah was the sister. Where is Amelia now? Sarah looked away, her eyes filling with genuine pain for the first time. I don't know. I wish I did. All I know is that after she ran, they found me. I was 22, still in college. They gave me a choice: either become the new focus, the new identity to draw attention, or they start cutting off loose ends. Starting with my mother. So you agreed to be their archive. I agreed to be their scapegoat. For 20 years, I have been Lena, Chloe, Vivian, and finally, Sarah. They set up the accounts, they funded the life, they guided me to places where a man like Michael, stable, high-profile, influential, would provide perfect, clean cover. Michael doesn't know? Of course not. He's the whole point. His life is my bulletproof vest. The moment he knows, he's exposed, and I'm compromised. I married him because I needed his security. But I stayed because I grew to love him. Which makes this exponentially worse. She stood up and went to the window, watching the serene suburban street. The game is ending, Ellie. The money becomes accessible on Tuesday. They are closing the loop. They want to use me for one final transaction, to retrieve the codes for the full $5 million which they believe Amelia left with me. And the rendezvous at Greenpoint Park? Sarah spun around, her face registering pure shock. My revelation was a powerful weapon. You cracked the notebook. Her voice was a terrified whisper. I am an archivist, Sarah. I understand code. What is being delivered at Greenpoint? Sarah's facade of control shattered. They think I have the encryption key for Amelia's final storage unit. They told me to meet their associate, a man who goes by the name of Cole, on Tuesday morning. I hand over the key, and they promise me a clean life, a final passport, and money to run forever. And you believe them? No, she said, a tear finally tracking a perfect path down her cheek. I believe that the moment I deliver that key, I become a liability. They will kill me, and they might come after Michael, just to tie up the loose ends. I looked at her. She wasn't the master criminal. She was a woman trapped in a perpetual witness protection program run by her captors. The money is accessible Tuesday morning. They moved too fast after my email, I noted. They suspect you are exposed. They moved the timeline up. What email? I explained the minimal correspondence with Detective Sterling. Sarah's face turned white. You contacted the original investigator? Ellie, you have brought the hunter right to the door. You just made Tuesday morning irrelevant. They will act now. The air shifted, heavy with impending doom. We both knew Sarah was right. My attempt to gain clarity had simply accelerated the explosion. The conversation ended not with a resolution, but with a paralyzing sense of exposure. Sarah stood by the window, breathing shallowly, calculating her next move. I was calculating mine. We were allies now, bound by the immediate threat to Michael. It was 10:30 a.m. Monday. I have to move the notebook, Sarah whispered, turning to run upstairs. If they come, they'll find it and the code will be useless. I was about to follow her when the noise came. It wasn't the cheerful ding-dong of the doorbell, nor the cheerful, insistent rhythm of the FedEx delivery guy. It was a methodical, heavy, rhythmic series of thuds against the solid mahogany of the front door. 3 perfectly spaced, heavy knocks. Thump. 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 Sarah froze halfway up the stairs. We both looked at the door. That's not the mail, I breathed, my heart seizing up in my chest. Sarah scrambled up the remaining steps, heading straight for the guest room. She was moving to the archive, instinctively seeking the tools of her survival. I moved silently to the small, circular window adjacent to the door, pulling the edge of the curtain back just enough to see. Standing on the immaculate porch was a man. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a dark, slightly severe suit, with an expensive haircut and zero expression. He looked less like a delivery person and more like an accountant for death. He didn't look aggressive, which made him terrifying. He looked professional. He knocked again. 3 short, sharp bursts. I retreated from the window. He's not a salesman, Sarah. Get down here. She was already descending, her face stark with absolute terror. In her hand, she held the thin leather codebook. That's him, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Cole. He was supposed to wait until tomorrow. He had been sent ahead. My contact with Sterling, my test email, it had been treated as a breach, requiring immediate intervention. They weren't waiting for the money transfer anymore, they were securing the source of the data. He wants the key, Sarah said frantically. But if I hand it over, he'll silence me. Then don't open the door. He won't leave. He doesn't take no for an answer. Thump. 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 The sound seemed louder now, resonating through the expensive, hollow architecture of the house. I looked around the living room. There was no escape route, no place to hide a grown woman for long. The windows were secured. Go to Michael's study, I instructed Sarah, my archivist brain kicking into high-gear triage mode. Lock yourself in. Call Michael. Tell him everything. No, I can't involve him. You already have. Go. Call 911 if you have to, but get off the main floor. Sarah hesitated, then nodded frantically and ran toward the back of the house, clutching the codebook like a lifeline. I went to the door. I took a deep breath, smoothing my dress, allowing the mask of the harmless, frail elderly woman to settle back onto my face. I opened the door, just slightly, keeping the security chain latched. "May I help you?" I asked, allowing a slight tremor of confusion in my voice. Cole offered a sterile, practiced half-smile. "Good morning, ma'am. I apologize for the intrusion. I'm here from Mr. Vance's firm. I'm Cole Mendy. I was supposed to drop off some urgent, confidential documents for Sarah Vance." He held up a pristine leather briefcase. Clean, professional. A perfect lie. "Oh, dear. Sarah is terribly unwell today," I said, leaning slightly on the doorframe, making sure he saw the fragility. "A very bad migraine. She's resting upstairs. Perhaps you could leave the documents with me?" Cole Mendy's eyes flickered, analyzing my performance. They didn't linger on my face, they looked through me, searching the house. "I apologize, ma'am," he said smoothly. "These documents require her signature and confirmation of receipt. Perhaps I could just step in for a moment?" I promised to be quick and quiet. "I'm afraid that's impossible," I replied firmly, summoning the stern tone I used to use on interns trying to reorganize the Lincoln papers. "She is asleep. My son strictly forbade any disturbances." Cole's smile vanished. The professional sheen cracked. His eyes narrowed, and I saw, briefly, the cold, lethal intent behind the mask. He wasn't there for papers. He was there to retrieve an asset. "Ma'am, I insist," he said, his voice lowering just enough to make it a direct threat. He took a step forward, placing a hand on the door, testing the chain. That was all the confirmation I needed. I didn't wait for him to try and force entry. "I'm calling security now, sir," I lied, and slammed the door shut, dropping the chain back into place. I stood behind the door, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. I didn't wait to see if Cole would try the front again. I knew he wouldn't. He was a predator, not a battering ram. I ran back toward the kitchen, pausing to grab the heaviest thing I could find, a large, ugly, porcelain vase that Sarah kept on the hall table, filled with dusty potpourri. It weighed about 7 pounds and had a satisfying, blunt shape. As I reached the kitchen, I heard the faint shing of glass breaking, muffled but distinct, from the back of the house. He hadn't been fooled. He hadn't bothered with the alarms. He had simply located the weakest point of entry, a small, decorative window in the mudroom, and breached the perimeter. "Sarah!" I whispered fiercely. I heard nothing but the frantic, muffled footsteps of Sarah running through the upper hallway, heading towards the study where Michael worked. I knew he would be fast. He was trained to neutralize. I gripped the porcelain vase, its surface slippery with sweat. "Archivists don't fight," a voice in my head insisted. "They document." But documentation wouldn't save Sarah, or Michael. I moved to the hallway that connected the kitchen to Michael's study. It was a narrow, dark space, offering excellent concealment. Cole Mendy appeared from the laundry room, moving with chilling economy. He wasn't running, but gliding. He moved with the competence of someone accustomed to navigating domestic spaces to achieve violent ends. He saw me instantly. The gray-haired woman holding an absurd vase. His expression registered fleeting contempt, then calculation. He wasn't going to waste time on me. "Where is she, old woman?" he hissed, his voice like dry ice. "She went out the back," I lied, pointing vaguely toward the yard. Cole didn't even look. He knew I was the decoy. He was focused on the stairs. I had to distract him. Not just for a second, but for long enough for Sarah to lock herself in the heavily secured study. I lifted the heavy porcelain vase over my head, and with a grunt of effort that surprised me, I threw it. I didn't throw it at him. I threw it against the marble floor, near the foot of the stairs, directly in his path. The vase exploded. The sound was deafening, a sharp, violent crack, followed by the tinkling rain of shards and the dry rustle of potpourri. It created a temporary curtain of chaos and noise, disrupting his focus entirely. Cole stopped dead in his tracks, momentarily blinded by instinct. His hands flew up, not in defense, but in annoyance. "You lunatic," he spat. That fraction of a second was all Sarah needed. I heard the solid thud of the study door closing and the metallic click of the deadbolt engaging. Cole was furious. He knew she was secured. He turned his full, murderous attention onto me. "You should have stayed invisible," he growled, taking a quick step toward me, his hands reaching. I didn't run. Running was impossible. But I still had one tool left from the arsenal in the hallway, an antique, heavy, solid brass press poppy that Michael had used to hold down his corporate manifestos. I snatched it up. It was cold and heavy. "I found the codebook," I stated, knowing that the key was to give him a new target, a new direction of inquiry. The word codebook stopped him cold, overriding his impulse for immediate violence. His eyes, as fixed on me, were now calculating where it might be. "It's not with her," I added quickly, realizing my lie had to be structured to send him away from Sarah, not toward her. "The key is digital. And only Michael knows the final access code." This was a massive, dangerous lie, designed to redirect the violence onto my son's professional life, not his personal safety. Cole stared at me, his gaze trying to penetrate my 72 years of collected history. He was assessing the plausibility of the claim. If the sister, Sarah, had given the code to the lawyer husband for safekeeping, it made a terrible, terrifying kind of sense. He wouldn't trust me. But he would trust the professional safety net Michael provided. "You're lying," Cole said, but the conviction was diminished. He was already thinking about Michael. "Call Michael Vance at his office," I challenged him, my voice shaking with adrenaline, but projecting absolute certainty. "He will tell you that everything connected to Sarah Thorne's assets runs through his encrypted server. He's the lawyer. She's the liability. You know that." Cole Mendy needed the money. He needed the key. He needed a quick, clean solution. A locked door and a hysterical, elderly woman holding a brass paperweight were not part of the plan. Michael Vance's office, a site of professional, traceable exchange, was a much cleaner path. He pulled a small, silver object from his pocket, not a gun, but a small, sleek radio. He spoke rapidly into it in a low tone, in a language I recognized as vaguely Eastern European. He was confirming the situation. Then he looked at me, his face set in stone. "You bought her a little time, old woman. But the game doesn't end until we get what is ours. And if your son has archived our assets, then he is now part of the history we are collecting." He turned on his heel and moved back toward the broken mudroom window with frightening speed. He was gone, leaving behind only the cold scent of expensive cologne and the shards of Sarah's porcelain vase. I stood there, hyperventilating, the brass paperweight feeling impossibly heavy in my hand. I hadn't stopped him. I had redirected him. From Sarah to Michael. I had saved my daughter-in-law, only to place a professional killer on my son's doorstep. The ringing of the telephone, moments after Cole Mendy disappeared, sounded like an emergency siren. I stumbled into the kitchen, picking up the receiver. It was Sarah, calling from Michael's secured line. She was weeping, ragged, the sound of years of suppressed fear finally released. "He's gone, Ellie. He's gone." "He's gone to Michael's office," I corrected, my voice still hoarse. "I told him Michael had the code." A horrified gasp came from the other end. "You told him that?" "Ellie, Michael doesn't even know I have a sister, let alone a $5 million liability. He needs to know now, Sarah. We bought him perhaps an hour. Get out of the study. We have to contact him." My priority shifted immediately from defense to warning. I had to tell Michael everything. The identities, the money, the mob connection, and the fact that a professional cleaner named Cole Mendy was heading to his firm with lethal intent. Sarah came downstairs, her face swollen, her body shaking. She was no longer the collected, perfect wife, she was Amelia's terrified sister. We used Michael's mobile phone number, which I knew by heart. He answered on the first ring, his voice sharp with professional frustration. "Mom, I'm in a critical meeting. I can't talk." "Michael, listen to me. I need you to leave the building immediately. Do not go home. Do not return to your office. Walk out now. A man named Cole Mendy is coming for you." "Mom, what in God's name are you talking about? Has someone tried to scam you?" "This isn't a scam, Michael. This is real. This is about Sarah." I handed the phone to Sarah, who took it with trembling fingers. "Michael, it's me," she choked out. "Everything I told you, my past, my family, it's all a lie. My name isn't Sarah Thorne Vance. My sister, Amelia, stole $5 million from some very dangerous people. They found me, and they made me live this life. They are coming for the money, and they think you are holding the key." The line was silent for a long moment, filled only with Sarah's desperate, gasping breaths. Finally, Michael's voice, cold and profoundly wounded, cut through the connection. "A lie? Sarah, we've been married for 10 years. Is my whole life a facade?" "Yes," Sarah whispered, the word a final, agonizing confession. "But I love you. Please, Michael. Just leave. Now. They are killers." There was a sudden, jarring noise on Michael's end, a crash, and a deep, masculine voice speaking clearly. "Mr. Vance? We need to have a serious conversation about asset recovery." Cole Mendy had arrived. "Michael!" Sarah screamed into the phone. The connection cut off abruptly. We stood there, paralyzed in the ruined hallway, staring at the dead phone. My son was now face to face with a professional killer, holding a lie I had given him as a target. I snatched the phone back, my hand steady despite the terror. "Sarah, we need the police, now. They'll never believe us. And if they get involved, the organization will just disappear. Michael is their only leverage now." My archivist training reasserted itself. Logic over emotion. We needed a professional who understood the depth of the crime, not just the symptom. "Detective Sterling," I stated. "He knows the history. He knows the players." I called Sterling immediately, using the number he had given me. I skipped the pleasantries. "Robert. It's Eleanor." The timeline accelerated. "Cole Mendy is at my son, Michael Vance's, law firm now. He's looking for the $5 million encryption key, and he believes Michael has it. Sarah just confessed to Michael." Sterling's response was immediate and focused. "Where is the firm? I'll call my old contacts at the precinct, but they'll be slow." I gave him the address of Michael's high-rise office building in Stamford. "Eleanor," Sterling warned, "if Mendy is there, he's not negotiating. He's collecting. He'll take Michael as collateral. Or worse." Sarah was frantic, pacing the hallway. "We have to go. We have to go to the office. We have to trade the notebook for him." "No," I said, putting my foot down firmly. "We trade the notebook for safety. We don't go into a hostage situation. We use the notebook to draw Mendy out and ensure Michael is protected." I looked at the codebook Sarah had dropped. The key to $5 million. The tool of her destruction. "The coordinates," I murmured, staring at the wall. "Greenpoint Park. Tuesday, 10 a.m. Mendy knows this. He was waiting for it. If we use the codebook now, we can create a counter-trade." I looked at Sarah, whose eyes were wide with desperate hope. "We need to set a new rendezvous. We need to lure Cole away from Michael, but under terms that guarantee Michael's release." "How?" I thought of the structure of the organization. They were rational. They wanted the money, not unnecessary violence that would bring the FBI down on them. They valued assets and retrieval. Michael was only useful if he had the code. If they had the code, Michael was expendable. My plan formed rapidly, cold and clear. I went to my laptop and pulled up the disposable email account. Sarah, I need you to translate something specific for me. I'm going to send Cole Mendy a message. It must be believable. I typed out a short, sharp message, using the technical jargon of the banking world. 2. Ether Dynamics encrypted contact. Subject, asset location change. Message, the key has been relocated. Client protection protocol initiated due to breach. New transfer time, 1400 hours today. Location, Greenpoint Park Dock. N41.22.887W73.11.002. Code exchange must secure collateral release. I showed Sarah the message. I'm telling them we moved the key to Michael's protection, and the price of the key is Michael's immediate release. Sarah hesitated. The dock? Why the dock? Because it's isolated, and it sounds professional. And because I want water between them and us. Sarah nodded, then quickly translated the message into a series of short, choppy phrases using the original Ether Dynamics substitution cipher. She was precise, rapid. The fear had sharpened her focus. I sent the email. The delivery was instant. We waited, huddled by the silent phone, for what felt like an eternity. 5 minutes later, the mobile rang. It was Michael. His voice was strained, hoarse, but alive. Mom? Sarah? They let me go. A man named Mendy told me to walk away. He said the key was relocated and that I was released pending a transaction at 2 p.m. What is going on? Sarah wept with relief, grabbing the phone. Michael, get out of Stamford. Drive anywhere. Don't come home. Just stay safe. I took the phone back. Michael, we're not safe here. Go to the nearest police station, but don't tell them everything. Just tell them you were threatened over a client dispute. We will handle the rest. You are now protected by their need for the money. Don't break that protection. Michael, shell-shocked but rational, agreed. He was out of immediate danger. The first phase of the plan had succeeded. Now, for the confrontation. It was 1 p.m. We had 1 hour until the new rendezvous time at the Greenpoint Park dock. I looked at Sarah. She was pale, but the manic energy of fear had transformed into a grim resolve. I need to go, Sarah said. I'm the only one who can make the exchange. The notebook is too valuable to risk Michael. You are not going alone, Sarah, I insisted. You are the asset they want. If they take you, they have everything. I'm going with you. I am invisible. I am expendable. I am the distraction. Sarah finally looked at me, really looked at me, seeing past the gray hair and the sensible shoes. Why, Ellie? Why risk your life for a woman who lied to your son for 10 years? Because you did it to save your sister, Sarah. And because you ultimately protected Michael. And because I refused to let these men continue to dictate history. My job has always been to ensure the true story survives. I'm not just going to deliver the code, I'm going to document their actions. I packed my minimal inventory, the small digital camera I used for nature photos, now used for documenting evidence, the leather codebook, and a small, heavy piece of polished granite I had picked up decades ago on a trip to Acadia. A weapon of last resort. We drove Sarah's anonymous, clean SUV toward Greenpoint Park. The park was vast, primarily forested, with one long and used boat dock on a quiet inlet of the Long Island Sound. We arrived at 1:45 p.m. The park was deserted. The dock was a long, splintered wooden finger reaching into the cold, gray water. We parked deep in the tree line. Wait here, I told Sarah. They will be watching for you. I will go out first. Ellie, don't be a hero, Sarah pleaded. I'm an archivist, dear. Heroes die. Archivists merely record the details. I walked toward the dock. The damp air smelled of salt and decaying leaves. I wore a simple raincoat and carried my small camera bag, looking exactly like an eccentric tourist determined to capture the dreary beauty of the inlet. I reached the end of the dock. The wood creaked under my feet. I stood there for 3 minutes, the silence pressing down on me. Then, I heard the sound of a powerful engine approaching from the water. A sleek, black speedboat, moving without registration numbers, rounded the point of the wooded island. At the helm was Cole Mendy. He was alone in the boat, but I knew his backup was close, likely hiding in the tree line on the opposite bank. The boat idled near the dock, churning the cold water. "Mrs. Vance," Cole called out, his voice sharp with professional impatience. "Where is Sarah? And where is the key?" "Sarah is safe," I replied, my voice carrying clearly over the water. "And the key is here." I held up the leather codebook, raising it so he could see the distinctive texture. The deal was simple. Sarah for the key. "The deal is now simpler," I stated. "The key for Michael's ongoing safety, and Sarah's permanent release from your organization. You take the key, and you never contact the Vance family again. This history is closed." Cole laughed, a short, humorless sound. "You think you can dictate terms, old woman? You are standing on a dock, alone, holding $5 million in your hand. And you are on the water, easily traceable, having already committed one assault on a major law firm in Stamford," I retorted, letting my voice drop into the authoritative tone of a historian who knows she holds the definitive facts. "My son is talking to the police right now about a corporate threat. The key is here, Cole. If you try to take me, Michael becomes a hostile witness, the media will get the story of the $5 million, and you will become the center of a federal manhunt. Your masters want the money, not the mess. You take the key and disappear." Cole Mendy paused, his eyes narrowing. He was calculating the risk-reward. The threat of FBI involvement and the media attention on the stolen money was a massive deterrent for his employers. He knew I was leveraging the biggest weakness of any organized crime syndicate, exposure. "Toss the book," he finally commanded. "I toss the book," I countered, "when I see you turn that boat and leave. I am not putting $5 million into the hands of a man who assaulted my son 10 minutes ago." This was the height of the bluff. I knew he was close to breaking. Suddenly, a voice boomed from the woods behind me. "Cole Mendy. Police. Hold your position." It was Sterling. He hadn't waited for backup, he had driven straight to the rendezvous point, betting on my location. Cole's head snapped toward the woods. His immediate calculation was to escape. Sterling's intervention was the final pressure point. "The book, now!" Cole screamed, pulling a small handgun from his jacket, a terrifying, final confirmation of his intent. I didn't hesitate. I pulled out my camera, focused on him, and snapped 3 quick photos of Cole Mendy, armed, on the water. Documentation complete. Then, I opened the codebook, ripped out the 3 pages containing the cipher, and held them aloft. "You want the future, Cole? You have to pay the price." With all my strength, I threw the sheets of paper, not toward him, but up high, letting the wind catch them. They fluttered and danced over the water, falling harmlessly into the cold inlet, instantly dissolving into the wet air. "No!" Cole roared, realizing the money had just become untraceable, useless. I still held the leather cover. I held the empty archive. "The key is gone, Cole," I said, my voice shaking with raw exertion. "Go tell your masters that the archive has been destroyed. And if they ever contact Michael Vance again, I will release everything I have documented." Cole made a desperate move, steering the boat towards the dock. "Go, Ellie, run!" Sterling yelled from the tree line. But I stood my ground. I couldn't run. I had to plant the seed of doubt. I threw the empty leather cover of the codebook at his boat. It hit the windshield with a soft slap. Cole stopped the engine. His face was pure fury, but his mind was on the cost. He knew that the money was now locked up, potentially forever, and that the only remaining assets were two frightened women and a high-profile lawyer, all now protected by exposure. He looked from me to the distant sound of Sterling's car door slamming. With a deep, guttural sound of frustration, Cole Mendy spun the wheel, revved the engine, and the black speedboat shot away, disappearing into the sound. Sterling rushed up to me, his face etched with disbelief. "Eleanor. What the hell were you thinking? You were standing there like a statue." I dropped the granite press poppy. My knees buckled slightly. "I was maintaining the cover, Robert. They needed to believe I wasn't afraid. And they needed to believe the key was truly lost. The papers are wet. They are destroyed." Sarah came running from the tree line, embracing me fiercely. "You saved us. You saved Michael." "We saved Michael," I corrected, leaning into her embrace, feeling the sudden, profound exhaustion of the last 48 hours. "But we have work left. The archive is open." Sterling looked at the three of us, the retired cop, the former archivist, and the former fugitive, a strange, tired crew bound by a criminal history. "We need to go to the precinct," Sterling stated. "We need to log this assault." "No," I said firmly. "We tell the police only what Michael told them, an asset retrieval gone wrong. We say the documentation was destroyed. We need to leave the $5 million in limbo. That money is the ultimate protection. As long as it's inaccessible, we are safe. If it is retrieved, the organization will be back." We drove back to Westport in silence. The perfect house felt tainted now, but also liberated. When we arrived, Sarah didn't clean the broken marble floor. She looked at the shards of porcelain and the scattering of potpourri, and a genuine, sorrowful look crossed her face. "I have to go, Ellie," she said. "I can't stay here. I ruined Michael's life. I can't let him be a target." "He doesn't think you ruined his life, Sarah. He thinks you trusted him with the truth. That's a foundation he never had before." But Sarah was resolute. She pulled out the one remaining unused identity card from her hidden pocket, the last resort she had kept with her during the confrontation. It was Lena Cruz, from Florida. "This is the clean break I was promised," she said. "If I go now, before they try to confirm my location, they will believe I took the last chance for freedom. They will close the file." She packed a single, small backpack with essentials. I realized then that Sarah wasn't running from Michael, but for him. She was sacrificing the comfort of her clean suburban life to ensure his continued safety. "Will you tell Michael?" I asked. "I already sent him a message," Sarah said, her eyes welling up. "I told him the truth was too heavy for him to carry, and that I had to go clean the slate. That I love him and I will be safe, but I can't contact him for a very long time." We embraced again. It was the first true, honest embrace between us. "Be safe, Lena," I said, using the name she would now carry. "Thank you, Ellie. Thank you for opening the door." I watched Sarah walk out the back door, disappearing into the suburban landscape. She didn't look back. She had traded her gilded cage for an uncertain, but truly free, future. Michael arrived home 3 hours later. He looked like he had aged 5 years. He saw the broken hallway, the police tape Sterling had briefly put up, and the empty space where Sarah's car usually sat. I sat him down in the living room, which now felt less like a display and more like a battleground. "She's gone, Michael," I said softly. He didn't cry. He looked numb. "Did they take her?" "No. She chose to leave. She chose to protect you. She told me everything about her sister, Amelia, the money, the mob. She was a decoy, Michael. And she used this house, and you, as her perfect cover. But in the end, she loved you enough to set you free. I showed him the final note Sarah had left on the pristine marble counter. The quiet life was the best thing I ever knew. Thank you for letting me borrow your history. Michael read the note. He crumbled it slowly in his hand. 10 years, Mom. 10 years of dinner parties, and mortgages, and planning vacations, all of it was built on a $5 million lie. Yes, I confirmed. But what matters is the foundation you build now. You are safe. The thread is gone. They believe the trail is cold, and the code is destroyed. You can start over. Over the next few weeks, the house slowly changed. Michael hired a crew to repair the damage. He filed for divorce based on abandonment, quietly, professionally. He didn't mention the aliases or the mob connection. He protected Sarah's secret, understanding that protecting the lie was now protecting his life. Our relationship changed fundamentally. He no longer saw me as a quiet, senile mother. He saw me as a collaborator, a strategist, the only person who had peered behind the facade and acted to save him. He talked to me, really talked, for the first time since his father died. The perfection of the house vanished. Dust settled. The cushions went unchopped. He was living, finally, a real, messy, human life. I packed my bags for home, feeling a profound sense of closure. My role as the quiet observer was over. But one detail still bothered me. The $5 million. Inaccessible, yes. But still archived somewhere, waiting for its rightful owner. And the suspicion that Amelia Thorne, Sarah's sister, hadn't just run, she had been silenced. The codes were for a final retrieval, a legacy. I had destroyed the current routing slip, but I still had the core documents, the photographs of the original newspaper clippings. And I had a profound understanding of the substitution cipher now. Before I left Michael's house, I went back to the guest room. The heavy oak wardrobe was now gone, Michael had donated it. The floor had been replaced, the baseboards freshly painted. No trace of the secret remained. But history is rarely erased completely. I sat on the edge of the newly carpeted floor. I opened my own small laptop. I pulled up the digitized copies of the Amelia Thorne newspaper clippings. I realized the cipher wasn't just built around the corporate name, Ether Dynamics. It could be overlaid on other texts. The system was designed to be modular. I focused on the obituary sections from 2004, searching for anything connected to the Thorne family. There was only one small notice for a distant aunt. But then, I found an article, published 6 months after Amelia's disappearance, about a small, high-profile construction project that had broken ground near the original Ether Dynamics office complex. A new, secure records facility being built. The new building, designed to withstand Category 5 hurricanes and extreme flooding, will archive digital and physical records for the region's growing financial sector. Archiving. History. I tried the Ether Dynamics key on the building's construction blueprint documents, which I managed to find buried in a municipal archive online. The cipher held. A small section of the blueprint yielded a sequence of coordinates and dates. Not for a transfer of money, but for a physical location within the structure. Sublevel 3. Sector Delta. Unit 14. I realized what Sarah had been hiding. The codebook wasn't just for a final money transfer. It was for a final storage unit. The unit Amelia Thorne had rented before she disappeared. And inside that unit, I was certain, was the full history of the $5 million, and perhaps, the truth about Amelia's fate. The organization wanted the code to destroy this unit, not access it. If the money was dirty, they wouldn't want the original ledger to be found. I copied the data into my own personal, encrypted drive. I realized my archivist journey wasn't over. It had just begun. I couldn't tell Michael or Sterling. This was my personal correction. This was the one document I could not let the villains of history destroy. I left Westport the next morning. Michael hugged me tightly, the first time in years he had held me with genuine, unguarded affection. "Thank you, Mom. For everything." "You are welcome, dear," I said. "Just focus on your life now. No more illusions." I drove toward my quiet New England apartment, the digital coordinates burning bright in my mind. When I arrived home, I went straight to my study. I opened my desk. I pulled out a small, empty, leather-bound notebook, the same size and shape as the one I had ripped apart at Greenpoint Park. I wrote the coordinates and the cryptic message on the first page. Sublevel 3. Sector Delta. Unit 14. I knew my quiet, archival life was truly over. The moment I had lifted that floorboard, I had joined the history I was supposed to catalog. I was now a silent participant in a dangerous game, holding the key to a 20-year-old corporate murder mystery. I closed the notebook, sealed it in a waterproof bag, and placed it under a loose floorboard in my own apartment. I thought about Sarah, now Lena Cruz, somewhere in Florida, starting over. I thought about Michael, rebuilding his life. And I thought about the true history that was still buried in Sector Delta. I smiled, a small, grim smile. The world thought I was a harmless old woman obsessed with dusty papers. They were wrong. I was an archivist. And my final project was retrieving the truth, $5 million at a time. The quiet life was the perfect camouflage for the perfect hunter.